Hello, I lost my mentor at the height of Act 2, but stuff still happened. So what's up? Today I'm going to do my best broken record impersonation. That was it. Because we're going to talk about the Iran war, and lo and behold, we're still doing it. The US and Israel are still bombarding Iran and Lebanon primarily because Benjamin Netanyahu wanted to. The death tolls are rising, and at this point, I don't really know what to do with regards to talking about this. So here's just kind of where things are right now. The current focal point is the disruption to oil trade, as there's a whole bunch of ships waiting to get through the Strait of Hormuz. This is a critical shipping route that isn't just some canal that Iran put some sort of like, sorry, we're closed sign on. At its thinnest, the strait is still more than 20 miles wide. And so what Iran is doing is basically saying, hey, we're not going to let any of these ships through. They're using munitions and naval drones, which are basically ships with bombs that... And they've already hit multiple tankers. Like, it sucks. This very obvious retaliation from Iran was very obvious before we went to war. But that didn't stop us from going to war and causing the very obvious outcome. And so those skyrocketing oil prices have stayed skyrocketed, and it doesn't look like it's going to come down anytime soon, which is why people are paying like $4, $5, $6 at the pump in the US, and they're like, what's going on here? Now, the White House was posturing as if we were going to send out ships that would escort these oil tankers through the strait, as if that's a thing that we can do. That didn't happen. So instead, we're just bombing a whole lot more, and oh, would you look at that? We've dispatched thousands of Marines to the region. Now, to be clear, these aren't boots on the ground. Yes, they are being sent to a war zone wearing boots, which will be on the ground. But that's not what boots on the ground is. Boots on the ground is something else entirely, but not this. Why are you asking for clarification on what boots on the ground is? No, I think you should be satisfied with the answer that I gave you already. Hey, podcast listeners, I just did kind of like a gag where I ran out the door while saying that. If you imagine, if you will, me running out of a door. Of course, they want to avoid acknowledging putting boots on the ground because that would just acknowledge our continued failure in Iran. All we've truly managed to do is kick up dust and kill a guy that was going to die probably this year anyway, as well as thousands of civilians. Oh, and that girls' elementary school that we bombed, there's been more investigation into it, and it really does look like we just kind of struck a girls' elementary school with a Tomahawk missile. Now, again, broken record. I keep talking about the elementary school that was hit by a missile, but I do that because it feels like, hey guys, we just hit a girls' elementary school with a Tomahawk missile, which is possibly the most recognizable US munition in the world. That seems like something I should probably keep talking about. Meanwhile, Russia's kind of digging this. You know, one of the big reasons that we're over there in the first place, or that we have any interest in Iran, is because Iran works with China and Russia, specifically in oil and also military stuff. Russia's been fighting their own war with Ukraine for a while. And so, like, they aren't really able to jump in and be like, hey, we're gonna side with Iran here. But it does seem like they are pretty happy with this war because they are now able to sell their oil for a much higher price. Because of the geopolitical disruption, Russia is now in a position to sell more oil in more places at a higher price, which they can use to fund their war. The US has claimed that Russia is sharing intelligence with Iran, and while I don't tend to take what the US says as fact, duh. Why wouldn't they? Not only does Russia get more money as this war goes on, but they've already got prior relationships in economics and war shit. Makes sense to me. I want to say one more thing for this before we move on, and I want to preface by saying that it's generally my policy to not have segments where I just talk about what some politicians said that's repugnant. These politicians are repugnant, and they say and do a lot of repugnant things. And if I talked about all the things that they posted on Twitter, I would never talk about anything else. And constantly calling them out for being repugnant doesn't really do a whole lot because they don't care at all. And I could be spending my time trying to get everybody to pay attention to said repugnance, but most people stop once they hear politician being bad, and they're like, yeah, duh. Which is why I tend to focus on other things. But with all of that said, there has been a sharp uptick in blatant, overt racism being proudly posted by members of Congress. Now, members of Congress in the US being racist is as far from new as you can get. But in recent years, they've largely felt that they've had to use dog whistles and coded language to give themselves benefit of the doubt. And now they're just saying, no, I meant the hard R. Granted, instead of being a hard R here, it's them saying Islamism is incompatible with the West. Specifically, most recently, we've got Andy Ogles and Randy Fine posting things to Twitter and saying things on video of them basically just being like, Muslims don't belong here and they're the enemy. I'm not going to quote their exact stuff because I do not need to replicate their bile, but the point is that they are feeling comfortable just saying this and doubling down to clarify that they mean it. They didn't accidentally insult a large group of people by accidentally misinterpreting what words they said. They were like, no, I meant that. Get them out of here. And I want to be clear that they're saying this because there is a contingent of people that support them in saying that. And they're trying to capture that group. Trump is going to fucking beef it soon. And a lot of people are trying to be the new big crazy guy in the room that'll get everyone behind them. I have a very strong suspicion that no one's going to be able to recapture the lightning in a bottle that Trump had. Do I think that him going away will fix all of this? No, absolutely not. But I do not think that right now, the best strategy is to publicly go on record being as awful as you can possibly be to large groups of people around the world. That worked for Trump. It's not going to work for you, Randy Fine. Moving on. What has ICE been up to? The usual. Abducting people, killing citizens, it's what they do. ICE recently abducted a Spanish-language journalist from a local news station in Tennessee. Stephanie Rodriguez Flores was abducted on March 6th after doing a few pieces at her network critical of ICE. What a fucking shocker that not long after she started being critical of ICE, her car, which was marked as a work vehicle for the station she worked for, was accosted while she was driving by multiple other vehicles. Vehicles full of ICE agents cornered her and abducted her, and she is now being held away from her husband and daughter. They never showed a warrant. Flores has been working in the US legally for over 5 years. She has a visa and is here legally. According to her lawyers, ICE never showed any warrant, and there's no legal precedent for them to hold her, which is exactly what we've seen from ICE all over the place. But ICE responded, and they cleared everything up. They said that their detainment of her is, quote, not in violation of any laws or regulations. I guess that clears it up. Work here is done. Meanwhile, or rather not meanwhile, last year in March, it turns out ICE killed another U.S. citizen. Ruben Ray Martinez was 23, and he was driving his car slowly through an area that ICE officers were, directing traffic. Originally, ICE put out the exact statement you would expect. They killed someone who was in a car. They claimed that car was coming right at them with deadly intent, just as we heard with Renee Good, and basically anything that involves a vehicle and ICE officers discharging their weapons. The body cam footage that's out now shows that he was driving slowly past a few officers. There didn't appear to be any officers in front of his car. They started to yell, "Stop him," and then they unloaded bullets into him. DHS originally claimed this was self-defense and didn't originally identify the officers as ICE, and it's pretty clear as to why. There wasn't any evidence recorded by onlookers to prove them wrong. This body cam footage came out, it's blurry and it's not great and still doesn't fully prove them wrong, but it's pretty clear that their story doesn't add up. I will say that one of the wildest parts of this story for me is that Martinez's mother voted for Donald Trump and said that she doesn't blame Trump for her son's death because Trump didn't pull the trigger. She said that something's got to be done to rein this in, but I can't think of a more concise example of the mindset of a Trump voter than that. 2025 was the deadliest year on record for ICE since the early 2000s, and 2026 is on pace to beat that. With disease, torture, and suicide rampant in these ICE concentration camps, things are pretty fucking bleak right now, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But I want to call out that all is not lost. I know that a lot of the things I talk about are really horrific and bad. It's not good right now, but people care. If people didn't care, it'd be a whole lot worse. But people care, and they are making moves. One example is Kansas City, Missouri, which recently passed a law saying, no, ICE cannot make any more of their people warehouses here. They are far from the only municipality doing that. There is real, meaningful pushback happening constantly all around this country every single day. And I do not want to dismiss the effort that people have been putting in to push back against all of this bullshit. So thank you to everyone who has been going out and chasing down ICE officers and getting in their faces, blowing their whistles, helping protect our neighbors. Because you have more grit in your pinky than any of these fucking basement dwellers that sit around talking about how happy they are that people they've never met in towns they'd never visit are being killed by federal agents. Hey, so I want to take a second and just say, I know that a lot of this is real rough. Trust me, I know. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking it out with me. And I want to be clear that it's not your job to fix everything. You should have good values. You should try to participate however you can, but this is not all your fault, and it's not your job to fix it all. Let's talk about anything else. Valve did not leave the New York Attorney General on red. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about how Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, is suing Valve Software, the video game company that makes Steam, Counter-Strike, and Dota, over loot boxes. The argument is essentially loot boxes are gambling, and it also allows children to gamble. That's illegal. Valve has now responded with a pretty rare statement on their part. They posted a rebuttal, more or less, on their help website. And so I want to go through sort of what they've said, how they are responding to this claim, and then I want to give some more of my own thoughts here because I feel like I didn't really clarify how I think about this last time. Let's start with their blog post. It's very lawyer-friendly, I would say that. But one of the first things it does is it kicks off by making the argument that loot boxes are basically the same as booster packs for a trading card game. Quote, "We shared with the New York AG that these types of boxes in our games are widely used, not just in video games, but in the tangible world as well, where generations have grown up opening baseball card packs and blind boxes and bags, and then trading them and selling the items they receive." But then the post pivots to being like, except also, the stuff that you said is against our terms of service. Quote, "In the process of cooperating with the NYAG's investigation, we have shared with them our efforts over many years to shut down accounts found to be using Valve game items on gambling sites in violation of the Steam subscriber agreement." I too violate the Steam subscriber agreement. It's up to you to figure out how. After that, they go on to be like, okay, also the changes that the New York Attorney General wants us to make would themselves be consumer hostile. Valve pushes back, saying that if they implemented these changes, they would make it so that items couldn't be transferred, which would be anti-consumer and fair. They also go on to say that they would have to start collecting more information to specifically adhere to the law in New York by doing more like geolocation stuff and trying to catch people who are using VPNs to get around certain laws and whatnot. Essentially tapping into the current fear of like age verification and surveillance on the internet, which is a fair fear. They end by calling out the New York Attorney General for her use of the video games cause violence line, which I'll go ahead and read you that quote. This is from the New York Attorney General press release regarding the lawsuit. Quote, "It is important to note that Valve's promotion of games that glorify violence and guns help to fuel the dangerous epidemic of gun violence, particularly among young gamers who can become numbed to grave violence before their brains are fully developed." Valve basically replied saying that's bullshit, and there are studies that say that's bullshit, and I agree. That's bullshit. And there's been a lot of studies that say it's bullshit. Ultimately, this is just an initial response. This isn't like they've done anything. We're going to have to see how this all plays out in the legal system. But as for how I think about this, are loot boxes gambling? I don't think I can answer that question. Not because I can't see the arguments one way or the other, but because, one, the legal definition of gambling changes wildly between countries, let alone states in the US. And two, I don't think that it really matters whether or not it's gambling, because I think this is all the wrong entry point into the problem. Said another way, I think that focusing on loot boxes and trying to target the regulation around loot boxes specifically misses the forest for the trees. What we really need are comprehensive consumer protection laws, especially in tech and gaming. If I'm a game developer and I was told that my loot box system is now too much like gambling, I would just figure out a new way to hide all those mechanics in other systems. Do that enough and bring on a lawyer, and you've suddenly got, at the very least, another court case before you have to do anything. But unfortunately, the US is pretty much the worst country to ask to put in consumer protections for basically anything, because we are already watching as age verification is being layered into everything. And the second that we start saying, oh, this is gambling and also targets children, think of the children, the think of the children is a huge alarm bell for me. Should kids be gambling? No. Should we have to verify our age with official documentation to play a video game? Also, no. For now, vote with your wallet, inform your friends, and continue to complain about bullshit patterns in game design. I say game design, it's not really game design, it's just like market design. Just nickeling and diming people with microtransactions. Lightning round. Atlassian has laid off 10% of their workforce, citing that they're going to invest in AI. I'll be back next week with a different company doing the exact same thing. The sexting feature for ChatGPT has been delayed. OpenAI was planning to release an adult version of ChatGPT that you could fuck digitally, but that's being delayed. Washington State has passed a 9.9% income tax on personal income over $1 million. Washington's one of the only states that doesn't otherwise have income tax. Some business leaders are like, ah! That was me being a business leader. The US has dropped dramatically in its ranking among countries in the Americas with regards to free press. It went down from 4th to 11th in a year. Number 1 is the Dominican Republic. Sonic the Hedgehog may have been ahead of his time. Scientists believe that some hedgehogs may be using inaudible communication frequencies, while other scientists believe that they are simply rolling around at the speed of sound. And finally for today, 5 drivers in Maryland owe over $600,000 of unpaid traffic violation fees in DC. Maryland and DC they share a border. DC's kind of like cut out of Maryland. And Maryland drivers are known for being among the worst, but one dude accounts for $284,550 in unpaid traffic violations in the city of Washington, D.C. He somehow has a car. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Stuff Keeps Happening. Head to skh.news for sources, bonus content, and a button to print your own traffic violations that you can just kind of play around with yourself. My name is Endeavorance. We'll talk again soon. Take care and be well.